All right, Mandy, do you want to kick us off?
Sure. Good morning, everyone. Thank you for taking the time out of the chaos and anxiety to join us to talk about what's happening in the restaurant industry. My name is Mandy Tavonen. I'm the Managing Director of RelishWorks. We are the corporate innovation hub for Gordon Food Service. Over the weekend, we realized the impact on our industry, and we quickly shifted much of our energy to be the convener of and distributor of information and support for the restaurant industry. Now, more than ever, it's important that we collaborate and with the private, public, and not-for-profit sectors. I'm actually dealing with probably what many of you are dealing with, a childcare issue today. So I'm going to hand the call over to my colleague, Nick Florick. He is the director of our Food Foundry Accelerator program, and he's going to facilitate a brief conversation with you. So thank you again for taking the time. Thank you for our panelists, and we look forward to the ongoing dialogue. And we'd like to engage you in an ongoing way via the website that you see on the screen.
Thanks, Mandy. Thank you again, everybody, for joining. We have 5 panelists who are joining us today. So we have Robert Fochtig, who's a senior advisor to Mayor Lightfoot for the City of Chicago. Sam Toya, president and CEO of the Illinois Restaurant Association. Greg Grossman and Ryan Van from DLA Piper, which is a global law firm. And Sean Garrett, president and CEO, United Way of Metro Chicago. The format for today is I will be guiding a conversation and some initial question prompts with each of our 5 panelists. There is for those joining the webinar, there is a kind of chat bot dialog box on your screen. You can submit comments or questions there. We will use those to kind of guide the conversation if there's anything specific that we're able to cover on this call. We won't be able to answer everything in a Q&A type style, given the volume of folks that are participating, but we will do our best to get information back to you for anything you submit through that chat bot. The other reference I just did want to provide folks is there is a website, eat.news, that is displayed on the screen. You can go to for further information. This is purely informational, site with different resources for restaurant operators and those who work in the restaurant industry, based on what has been shared so far from various kind of organizations across states within Illinois, but also kind of external and nationally and in Canada as well. So with that, I do want to kind of turn it over to Rob first. Rob, can you start? Do you have any updates on where things are with the restaurant closures in the city? What do we know at this moment, and what is being directed by the state versus the city?
Sure, of course. Thanks, Nick, and thanks, Mandy, as well for putting this together. You know, in times like this, communication is so very important. So if anyone ever has a question, you can always check out chicago.gov. We're putting updates and resources there on an ongoing basis. So I would encourage people to check that out. As you all know, the restaurants and bars were closed by the governor earlier. That's an ongoing situation. Obviously, we've been working closely with folks like Sam over at the Restaurant Association, but then also others in the hospitality industry like Michael Jacobson at the hotels, and then our partners over at Choose Chicago and MPEA as well, who are really feeling the brunt of this crisis. So, the mayor is speaking later tonight at 5 p.m. It'll be live streamed on the Chicago Mayor's Office Facebook page as well as Twitter. And she'll be delivering kind of an update on the city's response and be addressing a lot of the concerns I think that we'll be discussing today.
Great, thanks. So as the crisis has evolved and escalated, what other actions has the city been engaged with over the last couple of weeks? I know you've been talking to Sam and the IRA. Anything else specifically that has been done and that folks can look forward to?
Sure. Well, I think, the stuff that's been done already and been announced, I think, the governor has opened up unemployment benefits to folks who are not able to work because of COVID. Previously, you'd have to demonstrate that you were looking for a new job someplace. As long as folks are planning to return to their place of employment after this, then that requirement is waived. So I would encourage folks also to check out the unemployment website for employees. That resource is now available to them as well.
Great, thanks, Rob. I do want to turn to Sam now with the Illinois Restaurant Association. Sam, can you give some perspective on how restaurant operators are responding and reacting, and some of the top priorities you're working with them on right now?
Sure. So obviously we know it's extremely challenging times, and we are definitely, as Rob said, we are definitely communicating with the mayor and her team, and all her commissioners are right there to answer any questions we got. Also the governor and his director. So there is a lot of communication going on. As of right now, obviously restaurants can still do, delivery, pickups, and, carry out. We'll see, obviously the mayor's going to have a state of the city. We're going to see, exactly where we're going from here on out. There's definitely a possibility, we'll have a shelter in place, but we don't know the guidelines if that happens. I mean, we saw it happen. It's in San Francisco right now. Obviously, it's in Oak Park. They said they're going into shelter in place this weekend. We'll see if the city of Chicago is. Again, a lot of communication. We've been communicating with people with the mayor's people about maybe delaying somebody's labor ordinance, because right now, what do restaurateurs care about, right? They got to make rent, they got to make mortgage, but most importantly, they want to make payroll, because people come into restaurants for the food, but they come back for the service. So when we get out of this crisis, which we will, restaurants are going to open, but they need to keep their team members. So that unemployment benefits is, big at the governor's side. So people can go to, Illinois Department of Employment Security and check it out. That's where unemployment benefits are. So I encourage people to do that. Also, we at our webpage, illinoisrestaurants.org, every couple hours we're updating it to let you know what's going on. Obviously, the governor signed, I think it was yesterday, where he's getting low interest loans for SBA, and they can try to process that real quick. But really, where we're coming at it from is forget the loans. We need grants. We need the federal government to step up for the restaurant hospitality industry, kind of like what they did for the banks and auto industry in 2008. That's the message we've been trying to get out there, and it seems to be getting out there. Let's be realistic. Restaurants and working people that work in restaurants didn't do nothing wrong. Again, didn't do nothing wrong, and now people are going under. It's just not right. So we've been working with Senator Marco Rubio, and phase 3 is coming out. Obviously, Senator Rubio is starting to be the he wants to be the champion of this. So phase 3 hopefully might pass tomorrow or Monday. In that phase 3, he's planning to introduce loans to small business through community banks. Small business apply for these loans, basic operation cost and payroll for 6 to 8 weeks. At the end of the period, it will be forgiven. So I don't want to go, I ain't going to read the whole bill, but basically what he's saying is we need to help restaurants for 6 to 8 weeks. We got to give them grants so they can make payroll and they can pay their rent. If we get this will be very helpful. Again, there is going to be loans out there, but what I'm pushing for, what the industry pushing for, is grants, emergency grants, at least for operating costs. People can show their payroll and stuff like that. He's also trying to work with all local banks. So so it would be through the local banks. So a restaurateur could go to a local bank, show their books, and then hopefully get a grant for 6 to 8 weeks to pay their payroll and pay their rent, and it would be forgiven. That's what we're pushing on. If we get that, that will be big. And Senator Rubio is, like I said, I've been in constant contact with him. Obviously, he's trying to be a pragmatic conservative, as the mayor is a pragmatic progressive, which fine. We need pragmatic people right now. Forget the politics. Let's help these restaurateurs, because we are the largest private sector employer here in the state of Illinois with over 588,000 people working it. And that's what our elected leaders need to know. The president needs to know, you know what I mean? You're going to kill the restaurant industry if you don't do these grants, these emergency grants.
Mm-hmm. Thanks, Sam. Outside of kind of the advocacy at the government level, is there anything in particular you seeing restaurant operators can do that is within their control right now? I know a lot of returning to delivery. Is that are folks able to do that easily? Do you see folks needing?
Well, I mean, obviously, the restaurants that know how to deliver they're good. Like your local pizzeria, your local Chinese restaurant, they do delivery business all the time. They're fine. It's some of these sit-down restaurant, white tablecloth restaurants that really don't do delivery. Maybe they do like 10%. They work with Grubhub or DoorDash or Uber Eats. So they're trying to figure this out. But let's be realistic. Even if you figure it out, you're only going to get maybe 20 or 25% of your sales if you really weren't a delivery restaurant. So restaurants are still down 75%. However, 25% right now, it's all about cash flow. That's why hopefully later on today we're talking with the governor's people is maybe, he lets people not pay their sales tax, which are due on Friday, and then people can use that money for, now you're going to have to defer it. I don't think he would forgive the sales tax, but the point is if he, defers it for 30 or 60 or 90 days, that would give people that were going to pay their sales tax on Friday, March 20th, more cash flow. Because right now, it's all about cash flow to pay rent, mortgage, and most importantly, to pay the working people that work in your restaurants.
Great. Thanks, Sam. And then long term, how do you see this having an impact after we get out of this in the next, hopefully, month or so?
Well, I mean, we have a lot of restaurateurs. I'm preaching to the choir. It's going to be opening a new restaurant all over again. Remember, no one's going to have food, and then they're going to have to order more food than they usually do in supplies and stuff like that. So, which obviously Gordon knows this. So the point is, it's going to be like everyone's opening a new restaurant all at once, and hopefully, 4 weeks. But the point is, that's why you got to keep your team members. Because how are you going to open a new restaurant when you don't have your veteran team members with you? So it's going to be tough. We're at war with the virus. That's what we are. You know what I mean? And we got to beat this virus. And then we got to rebuild. It's kind of like the Marshall Plan. After World War II. That's what we're in. That's why we need these grants, and we got to keep leaning on these federal government, because the state and the city don't have that kind of money. It's the federal government.
Yeah. Sam, we're getting a couple questions and seem to be consistent. You mentioned the sales tax payment deferment. Do you have any insight right now, or is that something that's still being worked on as far as timing?
Well, hopefully, I was on the phone last night till about 10:30 at night. So hopefully the state will consider waiving state sales tax payments permanently or for a period of 30 to 60, 90 days to provide cash flow relief. So we're talking, again, I got to tell you, the governor and his department heads are communicating. I definitely at the table, communicating, trying to get their heads around this, and they are starting to get their heads around it. They haven't said yes. They haven't said no. I got to jump off the call. I'm jumping on a call with Senator Durbin, and then I'm back to the governor's people. I'm going to keep communicating. I'm here to represent the restaurant industry, and we have a seat at the table, but right now we got to keep pushing because you got the airlines pushing, you got the hotels pushing, you got the cruise ship people pushing, but the restaurants got to be at the top because we employ the most people. So that's what I'm going to keep doing. And like I said, the governor obviously understands the hospitality industry. His family came out of that, so he understands it's about cash flow right now. And that's what hopefully by the end of the day, we'll get an answer on the sales tax.
Great. Thank you so much, Sam. I will turn to Greg and Ryan right now. Can you guys talk a little bit about what you're following at the federal level? I know one of the relief bills was signed last night, and there's another in the work. What is being discussed right now that is particularly relevant to the restaurant industry and the folks on the phone?
Go ahead, Ryan.
Sure. Yeah. So a few key things that we're following right now that I think are particularly applicable here. One is there was a relief bill passed last night. It's awaiting signature. I haven't checked to see whether it's actually been signed this morning or not, but it's expected to be. What that does is it allows paid leave for the employees who are still at work, paid sick leave, and that is paid by the employer, but then it is a dollar for dollar tax credit on the quarterly taxes due to the federal government. We've seen some guidance, although I don't think it's certain at this point, that you could withhold ongoing FICA taxes in planning for that credit. So as a cash crunch becomes more real, that would be a credit against your taxes in the future, and probably something you could withhold. In the immediate term, though, what we're seeing, so that bill provides sick leave, and that's mostly applicable to people who are still working in some capacity. It allows them to leave for various reasons that would include sickness that they have themselves, symptoms they have, perhaps shelter-in-place ordinances to care for others in their family, including for school closures. And it pays for the first category, which is sickness and symptoms. It pays 100% for 2 weeks, and if it's to care for somebody else, it's 2/3 for 2 weeks. It amends a few other things, but I think that those are the key points for this bill. It applies to companies that have fewer than 500 employees. So I would assume that picks up most of the folks on this call. There may be smaller organizations with fewer than 50 who can opt out of it. More importantly, though, that's not going to affect which I think is the next key point, which is the unemployment aspect. And so that's been mentioned a few times here. The one thing I want to add to that is the governor has also waived the 1-week waiting period, which opens up a variety of options for employers. So it used to be that, or typically is across the country, you have to wait a week of being unemployed with no income before you can draw unemployment benefits. That's gone. Benefits start on day one. So we can encourage employees to go sign up immediately and start receiving benefits. What that opens up for employers is the ability to flex the workforce. So there can be furloughs. Furloughs mean that you're essentially relieving people of work for a certain period of time. That can be 3 weeks and see where things go. That can be for the folks who are essential services who stay on to keep the business running. You can flex them a week of furlough for every 3 weeks of work, or more often. You can have one off, one on, and reduce your payroll costs as that goes forward. The benefit of the furlough is that you're, to Sam's point, you're retaining your employees as employees. They stay on benefit plans. You can continue to fund their benefits if you choose to. They may drop onto COBRA if not. But the benefit is you're keeping your people on your team. They have a date on which they're expected to return or at least get further guidance. And another aspect of it is that it doesn't immediately trigger payout of all accrued PTO, which is a huge issue in the cash crunch at this moment. So it allows employers to keep their workforce, preserve some cash liquidity, and to see what happens in the future. So those are the key points that I'm seeing. Oh, and one other that I think will be key in 2 or 3 weeks or more when we come back up to speed is how do we keep this from becoming another issue that starts all over again? And as of right now, the EEOC has backed off its traditional medical testing guidelines, and we're in the pandemic response guidelines. What that means for employers is you have new options for what you can do for testing. I assume most of the restaurants here have access to a temperature gun. That's going to be something that we see a lot of employers doing as they start bringing people back into the workplace and ramping back up, is testing temperatures on the way in, perhaps even throughout the day, to make sure that everybody who's working is within normal body temperatures and not exhibiting fever symptoms. It's not a perfect solution, and it doesn't always identify someone who's sick, but it is one more thing to do. The other thing is employers can now ask about reasons for absence. So whether somebody's exhibiting symptoms, cough, fever, any of the other things that go along with this. And it allows employers then the ability to help ensure that it doesn't start the cycle all over again. Anyway, that's a brief summary of what we're seeing federal and state on the unemployment aspect.
Thanks, Ryan. Ryan is Greg. Are there any other specific things operators should look for that they have access to right now legally that would be helpful?
Yeah, this is Greg. I was going to comment on something that dovetails from what Sam was talking about when this all settles down and people are trying to spin back up their businesses. Obviously, you're going to have to spin back up the supply chain, which is going to have slowed down. I know a lot of these restaurants are probably operating on purchase orders, but to the extent there are any medium and longer term contracts in place relative to the supply chain that any restaurants might have, think you need to take a good hard look at those contracts and make sure that they're not going to be canceled or terminated in the intervening period. Most contracts have what's called a force majeure provision, and that's a provision that allows people to not perform on the contract during times like this and pandemics or quote unquote acts of God. But those provisions oftentimes only have a short window on them, like 30 days or 60 days. And so keeping in mind that this could last that long or longer before people are being able to spin back up their business, it will potentially give suppliers reasons to get out of contracts, preferably if they, from their perspective, if they think that they don't have great terms right now with people. And obviously they're going to have business reasons to want to continue doing business with most people, but it's just a point of, it's just a sort of a thought point to make sure you review anything you have there, or ask someone to review anything you have there to make sure you're not all of a sudden getting your toes stepped on when you try to ramp back up your supply chain and have a supplier say, oh, but you know what, we've actually had a reason to terminate the contract and we're not going to supply you anymore, because that would obviously be bad for the ramp up period. So just a point of thought there on the supply chain.
Great, thanks, Greg. I am going to turn to Sean now. I know obviously this is impacting workers and the general population a lot. There are a whole host of GoFundMe campaigns that have sprung up. We've linked to a lot of those on the resource site. Sean works for United Way. Can you talk a little bit more about the partnership you have with City of Chicago to help provide support during this crisis?
Yeah, absolutely. So our focus is on all of those that are impacted by the economic hardship associated with this at the individual level and family level. We're working with the Chicago Community Trust and the City of Chicago, frankly, across the metropolitan region, so other municipalities as well. Where we are right now, our website, chicagocovid19responsefund.org, is set up to receive donations, but it will transition as early as tomorrow to begin having a listing of places where we have put resources in who will be able to help individuals and families that are impacted with things like rent assistance, things like access to food, other types of basic needs that people have during this time period. A couple of things I can just give you right away. Chicago Food Depository has a website set up where you can help, where folks can navigate the various access to food right now. If your workers are in that type of situation, likewise with 311 or myentrypoint.org, folks can navigate the various resources that are open. One thing that I would suggest to all, and we'll make sure we get all of these listings, they'll both be on our website shortly, as well as we'll get them over to you all, is that before anyone goes anywhere, they call, because just like you all as an industry, the social service sector is having similar disruptions. And so we're trying to get in real time what locations are open, what ones are operating virtually, and what forms of payment are being transferred either electronically or in person. So it's shifting very quickly, but will be an infusion of philanthropic capital that will go into the social service sector to help support impacted workers, and that is beginning to deploy in, frankly, the next 24 hours.
Great, thanks, Sean. We on our resource site, we're linking to you all. I'm assuming folks can go to your site if they want to kind of donate. And then it sounds like you're still working with some of the partners to get more specifics on where people can access resources that those donations are supporting. Is that correct? Yeah,
I mean, our website will have that, but in the interim, what I would encourage people in the suburbs, it's myentrypoint.org. And for now, using 311 at the city level, those are the two kind of quickest locations for services. But our website will have that up shortly.
Great, thank you. We all do have some of the questions that are coming in are very kind of legislative specific. So what I'm gonna suggest is that we will provide kind of updates to those as legislation gets and rules get put into place on the resource site. I know a lot of this is moving, so there aren't specific answers to some of the questions we have right now, but what we'll do, we will keep kind of the the information updated as much as possible as we go through this crisis, continue to push things to people. So we'll do our best to stay kind of up to date virtually, and we will share a lot of the comments that we have with our group to try to get answers out to everybody on some of the specific things that are coming through. With that, I did want to see if anything if our panelists had anything else that kind of over the course of the last half hour they thought was worth kind of sharing with the group that hasn't been communicated. All right. So I do want to thank everybody for joining. We do have all the questions that folks are submitting, so we will get answers out as best we can to some of those. Feel free to continue kind of asking questions at eat.news. There's a contact form for additional questions there. We will keep that refreshed and updated on a daily basis. And if this is helpful, we will look to continue to do these types of forums in the future if it makes sense. So thank you again, everybody, for joining. And I hope everybody is able to kind of stay safe, and we'll get through this in the near future. Thank you.